Brooke reached out to me a couple months ago after my name was mentioned in a New York Times story about a group of workers who had created this amazing archive of images. These workers had created a lovely archive of images about their own lives. I had been asked to volunteer just to teach them a little bit about photography. So Brooke had contacted me to come and speak, and I thought, there's no way I'm standing up in front of a bunch of people and do this. This is not what I do. But I thought this was an opportunity to amplify their story. And that's what I've done my whole career as a newspaper photographer, is to get into people's lives, make pictures of their lives, and then hopefully those photographs go out to help humanize and inform people about what's going on in the world. It's fair to say I'm a pretty shy introvert. My brothers still kid me that when I was younger, I would have to ask my brothers to order for me when I went to McDonald's because I was too nervous to talk to the people up front. To say the least, I was a kid that was not going to put himself out there socially. I was probably the one who would stand in the corner and have one friend. But I received a gift from my grandmother when I was 14 that would change my life forever. She gave me this camera, which I still have. It's got dust on it, doesn't work. It's actually a film camera, which probably many people have never seen. She gave me this camera, and I remember my mom being really taken aback by why her mom would give me such an expensive gift. My mom might have thought it was a fad that would just pass through, but I like to think that my grandmother knew something about this small black box that she gave me. I like to think that she knew that by buying me this, I would be forced to face some of my inner fears, and in doing so, my little world would be changed forever. For a shy kid, this camera has allowed me to engage with people yet still have a place to hide behind. It's helped my curiosity bloom. It's forced me into challenging situations and forced me to grow as a person. Slowly, it forced me out of my shell. It oftentimes introduced me to people that didn't look like me, that didn't act like me, that didn't speak like me, or didn't dress like me. It helped me challenge all the thoughts and preconceived ideas that I had about people by forcing me to slow down and listen to their stories. And it inspired confidence in me that I'm not sure how I would have gotten if I hadn't have done this. But it was my junior year at college at K-State that my eyes were opened a bit wider when I began a story about a fellow student who was sick with a rare form of cancer. Michael graciously allowed me and a writer to follow him on what would turn out to be his last year of life. That process of making that group of images, especially the ones that were made in the last few weeks of his life, were the toughest pictures I had made in my life to that moment. I can still remember the emotions of that whole event and remembering treading very lightly and shooting very little and being nervous how I would be perceived, but also wanting to make sure that I didn't make Michael feel like I was taking advantage of his circumstance. I probably shot less than one roll of film between the last time I visited Michael at his family home, as you can see. I probably shot one roll of film between the last two times that I was with him or his family. And for me, that was next to nothing. After Michael's death, the student paper ran a special pull-out section telling his story. It was a very big deal for the paper. They put a lot of effort and resources into this story. And I remember reading the notes that people wrote in after the fact, talking about the story and how the photograph showed Michael with such dignity in his last days. It was that moment that I realized that photographs had real power. I had always said that, but I never really realized it. These pictures had power to influence, power to inspire, power to raise awareness, power to humanize people in a way that I didn't recognize before. I went on to graduate from college and got a job as a newspaper photographer. It was my lifetime dream. Don't laugh. And I took this story with me as I went along because I think it shaped the way I looked at people. It shaped the way I looked at things and reminded me at times how important both the big and small moments in people's lives were. A few years out of college, just a few years, I found myself on a plane to Iraq. The invasion of Iraq was about to happen. And I got into Kuwait with a backpack of equipment, 2 pairs of pants, 3 pairs of underwear, about 4 pairs of socks, and 2 cameras. I reused the underwear many, many, many times. I learned how to turn the socks in and out and use them as many times as I possibly could. And I would spend 2 months sleeping on the ground and on top of Humvees and everything else you can imagine, telling the stories about soldiers and what I was seeing. It was quite an experience, to say the least. I had a first-hand view of the war and all the serious moments that came along with it, and the not-so-serious moments. It quickly became evident to me that doing this work was nothing like you'd see in a movie. There were long moments of boredom and searching for meaningful moments. And there were moments that made you question what in the hell we were doing here and how we were going to salvage the outcome of this war. It didn't take long before I realized that there were real people standing in between the two sides. And it was mind-numbing, to say the least. Over the next few years, I would travel to Iraq another 5 times. I would travel to Afghanistan a few times. And on my first trip there, I got the chance to photograph some of the Army's most elite soldiers, the Green Berets. It was a world that I wanted to get my cameras into for a long time, but it was literally closed off to reporting. Somehow I got lucky, and my friend Kevin Maurer and I got to spend some time with these men to see the quote-unquote unconventional war that was being fought in secret. It was an unbelievable time in my life and career, but the reality was regularly tempered by the realities that I was getting to see almost on a daily basis. I traveled to Afghanistan for the last time in 2008. The photographs that I was making at the time was what I wanted to do, but paid work was harder and harder to come by, and it was just getting difficult to make a living, so I came back to KC. I had quit my newspaper job in 2005 because I was tired of the daily grind, so I knew I didn't want another full-time newspaper job. That ship had sailed, I was kind of done with it, the deadlines and the whole 9 yards. So I had to kind of start over. No one knew who I was out here, and I eventually started doing some work for the New York Times after Dr. Tiller was killed in Wichita. I had traveled down there, and it started a relationship with the Times, and I worked for them for quite a while. Along the way, I picked up a video camera, like many news photographers who were trying to stay relevant. Let me rephrase that. I begrudgingly picked up a video camera. But it was clear to me that the writing was on the wall. Photography, the way I like to utilize it, was dying, and I needed to broaden what I could do to stay relevant. Always looking for a good story, I went to a fast food worker strike in 2013. Heard about it from a friend. Thought, why not just go down and see what these people are talking about, see who they are. And I went to Troost, where these workers were striking. And I listened to a Burger King employee, Terrence Wise, speaking about working full-time in a $200 billion a year industry and living in poverty. He spoke of how he and his wife worked 3 jobs between them and still needed welfare to get by. I thought that was just unbelievable. His testimony was powerful, and it seemed to me that this was something worth following. I decided I would just start following this for myself. I didn't care what the media was doing. I didn't care if the pictures would get published or the video would get published. I thought the fact that Terrence stood up in front of people and aired his laundry about being poor and being on welfare was a powerful testament, and that there had to be something here. I spent about 6 months filming everything I could about this movement. The issues these workers were raising were being backed by some very credible research, and the workers were becoming very adept at telling their stories with their voices during their strikes. On strike days, workers were marching into their shops, using like bullhorns to make their demands right to their bosses. It was brave and bold to watch, to be honest with you. Their message of poverty wages was beginning to take hold and being discussed more and more in the media. More workers were joining the movement here and throughout the country, and they were testifying about the effects these low wages had on them, their families, and the communities they lived in. And it was at that moment that an organizer, Mike, sitting right here, approached me about mentoring some workers on how to do photography. And he reminded me or explained to me that worker movements in the past had always used art, literature, poetry, and photography as a way to share their stories. And he asked if I would be willing to share a bit about what I knew about photography with these workers. As Mike was discussing this idea, I remembered back to a mentor of mine once when I was in college who told me that he would share everything he knew about this business. All I had to do was pay it back to the next person that asked. I remembered all those people who invested in me, my grandmother, my parents, the people I had photographed over the years who opened themselves up with their stories to me, fellow journalists who had opened themselves up to me to help me. I remember those moments where I realized this type of work had meaning and purpose. And then I remembered my wife, who has stood by me for a decade through my travels, through my doubts. All right. Who has always reminded me how important this work is, how important these people are. She reminded me that this process is how I communicate with others and how I explain to others what I see as important. She never allowed me to quit, most importantly, much like these folks. I said, of course, to Mike, for sure, be willing to help out any way I could. And in March 2014, a collection of about 20 fast food workers were gathered. Mike explained to these workers how this group was going to try to do something different than hadn't been done before in this movement. We were going to use cell phones to document their lives. They were going to use cell phones. Let me rephrase that. They were going to use cell phones to document their own lives. Workers had been talking about what poverty wages look like, but no one had seen it. What does that mean? What does poverty wages look like? They had explained the toll it took on their lives and their families, but no one had seen what this looked like. So from the outset, I knew we weren't going to create photojournalists. For one, we didn't have time. I'm not smart enough as a teacher to be able to do this. I'm a photographer. And we didn't have much time to get people going. So I knew that these little things here have revolutionized a lot of things. And that if we armed people with these cameras, they would be able to create the pictures that they needed to, largely because they could put them in their pockets and photograph things as they went around. So we gathered this group and we went through the cameras and we got them all set up and we told them what we wanted to do. I knew going along that to be successful and make good pictures, it's access. Access is key. If you don't have access, you don't have great pictures. These workers sadly had access to everything. I imparted this to them and told them that their job was to document their lives, and while doing that, they needed to be honest in everything they did. The images needed to be real representations of their lives if we were going to get the viewing public to understand just what poverty wages look like. I told workers we needed to shoot everything. Everything you see, you need to shoot. The good, the bad, and the ugly. We planned on bringing all these photographers back each month. We'd sit them down, grab their phones, download the material. I would sit down with each photographer. We would look through their take, and we would talk about what worked, what didn't work, how well they were doing. It was a time for me to get to know these people better, to encourage them. And I was getting something out of this. I was actually seeing also, ahead of time, what these wages, what their lives look like. It was staggering. I had no clue what to expect when we tasked these people to do this. I had no clue. 20 people might come back with 3 pictures on their cameras. I had no clue. I was absolutely surprised. This is from the meeting. I'm sorry, I'm not getting this 2 things together here. I was totally surprised when the first group of images came back. Cassara Martin captured this image on the first month. I think she named it 3 generations, 1 room. 3 generations of a family living in 1 room. Casey Dampier made this lovely image of a mural outside of a McDonald's restaurant. It's just such a beautiful, beautiful picture. T.J. Nelson captured this image, which basically says everything. McDonald's stealing wages from workers and their desire to create a union. Captured with a cell phone so beautifully, the arms coming in. I mean, that couldn't have been, I would have shot that picture that way. Beautiful. I actually might have not done it that well. Casey Dampier, again, with this image of his sparsely decorated living room, is one of my favorites. Another worker, Crystal McLemore, which you'll see some of her pictures in a minute, response to seeing this image in the New York Times story. She said, "That's a really powerful picture to me. It shows I make do with what I have. The lighting in the picture is light, but then there's also dark. It's a searching for your way out kind of picture. We're trying to climb through a dark tunnel to get to the light," she said. That's what this campaign is about. That picture to me sums that up very well. We asked the workers to photograph themselves at work with the caveat that they needed to really be careful because this was their job. We didn't need people to get fired. It was very important and something we stressed. Other things began to pop up as I began to look at these photos. The kids. And there's a myth out there that fast food workers are all high school kids. I went to McDonald's just the other day for breakfast. There was no high school kids there. I'm guessing they were at school. Workers were photographing their kids, making just absolutely lovely images of their pictures. This is just a great picture. Just a lovely, lovely, lovely images. 26% of fast food workers have kids. Lindsay Zimmerman captured these two images, which are just so poignant. A birthday cake. A birthday cake. The average age of a fast food worker is 29 years old. It's not 16. It's 29. These are adults. She captured this other image of her empty refrigerator, which she named Empty. No money, no food. Fast food workers' families use $1 billion a year in food stamp benefits. Simmer on that for a little bit. The industry made $7 billion in profit. Those pictures are telling. Cassara Martin's picture of her bank account at the end of the month. Tells the struggle of getting by. There's probably been times when that's happened to me, but it's not every month. That's an amazing picture for someone who goes to work every day. I also stressed to these workers that we needed to see the happy moments in their lives because those are the moments they're going to remember, and they're important to document because life still goes on. Despite living in poverty, you still put one foot in front of the other. In this lovely photo of Crystal at her baby shower. This lovely picture of Crystal is just great. It's happy. It's that moment of something positive. And workers, of course, were photographing their strikes, making these great pictures of illustrating the wage theft issue. And more importantly, image on the right, how 51 workers in September last year went to jail doing civil disobedience. They thought it was important enough to sit down in the street and block traffic to get the word out about what's going on in their lives. 51 workers went to jail. So it was clear that we had a lot of good work here. I'm looking through this. We had 4,000 photos shot by 24 worker photographers. There was a large collection of pictures, and I'm going to kind of scroll through this because I want Dallas to get up here. And the show opened. We had a show at the Talk Shop Gallery on Main Street. They hosted the show on May 1st, International Workers' Day. The show got named I Too Am America, after a Langston Hughes poem. The New York Times caught wind of the show. Dallas, come on up here. And on the opening day, they published a story about these workers and the work that they had created. That story got a ton of attention. And it it garnered more and more reporting overseas, and soon people all over the world were talking about this. So I'm going to talk just real quickly about Dallas. Dallas is 21. He's worked at churches, making minimum wage when he started. And he told me last week that 2 years ago he was at churches and he was looking at his paycheck. And he realized he got screwed out of some hours. His boss had screwed him over. And he was pissed. And at that moment, talk about timing, striking fast food workers walked into his shop. And they heard him. And they said, "You should join us. We're actually talking about this exact same thing." And so Dallas walked out of his job that day. I haven't had that many jobs in my life, but I've never walked out of one like willingly because I was pissed off. So Dallas is going to come up, and he's got a couple photos in here that I was really taken by, and I want him to speak briefly about these images. This is Dallas. Tell me a little bit about this image and what was going on in your life.
This is eviction day. That's my girlfriend, Cassie. This is around 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning. I'm saving the best for last, which is my closet. So I had just got paid maybe 2 days beforehand. My check was nothing but $200. The eviction we had to come up with $1,100. So that wasn't gonna cut it. I really felt like I was working for nothing. I felt like it was pointless, you know, all that effort just to be stuck where I'm at, still struggling, not going nowhere in life. Well, that was a hard day.
And his story is representative of a lot of people. Evictions are not specific to Dallas.
No.
This is something that happens often.
Oh, yeah. I can't remember, because it was just me and my mom growing up. I can't remember being in any apartment or house to where we didn't have boxes stacked to the ceiling if we was worried about getting evicted. Like, that was always in the back of our heads. We was always on edge about that. So.
And Dallas, you know what I loved about this and about Dallas is that he had the presence of mind to capture this. Oh. And in his collection of images, which you won't see here, he had those photos of his boxes standing up in his house next to his TV. And as he's just testified, living in a state where you're always thinking you're going to have to move. It's amazing. But Dallas also captured this. But when I first saw this picture, I just thought, oh my God, so many aesthetically beautiful things about this picture. The lines, just everything about it. So I asked him, you know, where were you?
Oh,
what's up with this?
I was in Chicago maybe a couple of weeks after I had joined Stand Up KC. We was in Chicago to protest at the McDonald's headquarters. We had to bring it to the big man because we were serious. So this is after we got done protesting. You know, we was just walking around sightseeing. I had to take pictures of stuff that amazed me. I've never seen a building that tall before in my life. I've never seen a train going through the middle of a city. Absolutely put me in awe. Even the street lights, like I've never seen them before. That was amazing to me. But to me, this photo represents economic growth. I feel like if downtown Chicago can be extremely wealthy, what about the outskirts of them? What about those neighborhoods? I feel like when people look at photos or cities, they only look at the wealthy side. I just want people to get the big picture. I want them to know, you know, it's not all extremely wealth. It's just like in Kansas City, you know, the east side is low-income houses, you know, low-wage jobs, and west of Truce is exact opposite. I want people to know Chicago and KC is not all about tall buildings. It's not all about fountains, you know. I want people to know the real story and what goes on. I want them to know my story, my point of view. And I feel like this photo helps me explain that.
He did a fantastic job, and the other workers did too. And stay right here because you're going to take questions. Don't leave. You know, these little cameras, these folks took these little bitty cameras, oriented them in the right way, in the direction right in front of them, what they were seeing, and created this body of work that is really impressive. They learned to use their voices in a new and different way. And doing that, they amplified an important issue, one that we should all be aware of: poverty wages. This archive, ongoing archive of images, puts the viewers on notice of what it looks like and what the working poor look like today. To wrap up, I've been thinking about this project a lot the last few weeks, and it has reminded me of a few things that became so clear to me 20 years ago. Photographs have real power. Power to influence, power to inspire, power to raise awareness and to humanize people if done with care. It's reminded me, someone who's not doing so much photography anymore and moving more into the video world, that this is why I got into this. These people, these stories are what's important in the world. So thank you.
Are you guys using Instagram or anything to post all your pictures?
You know, this is, as Mike laughs, we're not. And, you know, I think, to me personally, this is a worthwhile endeavor that I'm hoping we at some point can create a website or do Instagram. Maybe we should just do Instagram and keep this going, because that's actually a lovely idea. We need to do this. I'm not social media savvy. I leave that. My wife's way more smart about that stuff. But yeah, I mean, this should be we should continue this on with Instagram.
Yeah.
And we should figure out a way to make that happen, because this needs to, people need to become aware of it. And maybe you just gave me the great idea. I promise to credit you if it happens.
Just to piggyback on that, you should just have a hashtag so people anywhere can submit their images, and just you'll start a massive collection of them.
That's great.
Call it 15 something.
That's great. No, good.
Can you speak about, so your involvement in stand-up, Casey, like that day you walked out, to what has sort of happened in your life and how it's changed it, and where you're at now, and how that works?
Okay, well, me walking off that church's chicken job was, I say that was the best thing that happened to me, because, you know, it made me get involved with people that I knew that was fighting for something. You know, it made me feel like I was doing something that's actually worthwhile. You know, I'm not just wasting my life just in a low-wage job, not doing anything, you know. But my life, I feel like it changed since then. I never been out of town, which I got to experience that with Stand Up KC. Never protested before, and I'm the biggest supporter when it comes to that. Like, I'm always there in the front row doing that. So, you know, I say now I feel like I have more experience coming from it, and I feel like I'm just working my way up to better jobs until I get comfortable from there. I'm still going to support for the low-wage workers and all that. But, I mean, that's all I could say.
Just to add on just real briefly, you know, Dallas and lots of other workers here in Kansas City have organized themselves. And together, they share stories, and there's a, you know, this kinship there that they have now. And they use that power and that kinship to make these demands, to get a better wage, to get a union eventually. And you'll see around the country, there's cities that have raised their wages. Here in Kansas City, City Council just voted a couple weeks ago, raised it $13 an hour. There's some things going on there that's going to hold that up. But these workers slept on the front steps of City Hall, forcing City Council members to walk by them every day. They produced these images that were used as a reference to explain that. So these workers, the poorest of the poor workers, with no money, no backing, have been able to take the narrative and own it. And they're having incredible success with it. If you're not paying attention to this, pay attention now. You're going to hear every presidential candidate talk about this. They will have to answer to these workers about why you could work full-time, still be in poverty. This is something that all of us of privilege, especially, should pay attention to, because these are people just like us.
What if every time somebody got on Instagram and looked at hashtag...
I'm stoked on your Instagram thing.
Hashtag
Seriously.
Kansas City, it's on people's sleeves.
I agree. I'm sold.
That's like priming the world of like of something important.
Yeah,
Not do that.
we should. We should do that. I mean, this isn't, I can't say this enough. It's an important body of work. It's an important issue. And it's people telling their own stories. It's not Dallas going through me to tell his story, which I would treat with care, dignity, and respect. It's him, though. It's him doing it. It's not him calling me and, you know, and telling me to get over here. It's being able to do it yourself. There's power in that.
What do you suggest for, I've been wanting to go to these protests and get involved.
Yeah.
But due to time and scheduling, but it's an issue that is really close to my heart as well. I was just wondering if you have any suggestions of like how to get involved, even if you can't go to these protests.
Second row right there, those are the people you need to meet. There's Mike right here, Rachel, Jeremy, Cassie, of course. They can, and there's avenues to learn about what's happening, what's going on. Facebook, of course. See, I am a little bit social media savvy. But these folks know it, and I'm certain would be willing to utilize you if you're willing to help. You've had your hand up.
Dallas, I'm wondering what you would like to do in the future, because so far I'm thinking,
Good question.
photographer, you could run for office.
Don't run for office. No, I'm kidding.
I would love to continue photographing. I would, if I got my hands on a professional type camera, oh, that'd be it. Like, I'm taking pictures of everything, you know. I feel like that's the way to boost my success. Like, if I had a camera, I'm gonna get one. I'm gonna make something of myself. I feel that.
I think that's applicable to all the workers I've ever met. The potential of all people, obviously, is great when armed with opportunity. Opportunity being the key to everything. Questions? That's it.